incredible what can happen when you build collaborations that produce a win-win outcome for everybody involved. And that is precisely what the Blue Whales, Blue Skies program is doing from the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation. It's producing fewer whale strikes, cleaner air, and a quieter ocean, and good business outcomes for these large shipping companies. This is the conversation that I have with Jess Morten, Director of Marine Resource Protection at the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation, on today's episode of Science Solutions Santa Cruz. I'm Jonathan Hicken. Enjoy. In the studio today, we have Jess Morten, Director of Marine Resource Protection at the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation, headquartered right here in Santa Cruz. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Your connection to Seymour Center actually goes way back because you, I understand, were roommates with Deputy Director of the Seymour Center, Lauren Donnelly Crocker.
It's true. I think I was 21 when we shared a very small space in Gloucester, Massachusetts at the Whale Center of New England. So,
what were you doing out there together?
We were doing a bunch of field research work as part of an internship at the Whale Center of New England, which used to exist, but then unfortunately closed. I forget how many years ago now. But they offered this really cool field research internship that I got lucky at the last second. I made it in basically at the last minute for the cohort I was involved with. I think Lauren went through the normal process and I got squeezed in at the last second. But it was us and ultimately one other girl that supported that nonprofit group that does a lot of whale conservation and research work in the Gloucester, Massachusetts area. And we were just out on boats every day taking mainly behavioral research data. So we were tracking what humpback whales mostly were doing, but also right whale survey work too.
So how did you go from studying whales, like in a sort of scientific sense, to the place you are today? Like, what was that journey?
It was an interesting journey. I feel like when I talk to student groups, a lot of the time I explain it that I feel like if you look at my resume, it kind of looks linear, like it was thoughtful and planned. It was not. When I was living it, it felt all over the place. But I will say when I graduated undergrad, I got really lucky that I got that spot at the Whale Center of New England with Lauren. It then drove me to get more field research positions. So I moved around the country a whole bunch, following whales around, doing different stuff, aerial surveys, and scooping killer whale poop in one instance, which was also really fun. Less gross than you would think. And that turned into me deciding I need to take a break from moving around the country so much because as people who have done field research know, especially like seasonal temporary positions get exhausting. And I then shifted to take basically a fundraising, like grant writing job at Environmental Defense Fund. And so I took a job at EDF in New York City. And at the time I remember being like, oh no, like this is a demotion away from what I want to do, which is field research. And then looking back, I spent 2 years learning how to write well, how to cultivate funding relationships, how to go after grants, which obviously, is a really important part of running a nonprofit. And so did that. And then I was lucky to be around a whole bunch of really cool program policy folks that urged me to consider going to school again, get my master's in policy, which is what I did. And then after getting my master's, I immediately applied for the Sea Grant Fellowship, which lined me up with Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, and basically haven't left that ecosystem. I've migrated over to the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation, where I'm now director of a program, which I honestly have the best job in the world. I am so lucky. It's so fun. But I also get to partner really closely with NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, which is where I got my start back when I did that Sea Grant Fellowship.
I can start to see how, your experience as a researcher, your experience writing grants, your experience with the federal government would feed into this program where you have multiple stakeholders at multiple levels of business and government and nonprofit, and it's kind of all coming together. What I'm talking about, of course, is a program that you run, Protecting Blue Whales, Blue Skies, which is what we're here to talk about for the most part. So tell us, just as a starting point, give us the pitch. What is the program?
So I think if I try to keep it to one sentence, I try to explain it as it is a verification and recognition based vessel speed reduction program, which I know is still a mouthful. But basically, the origins of the Blue Whales Blue Skies program is that we created this incentive based effort to complement existing voluntary measures that were implemented off of the California coast. So 15 years ago, NOAA as an agency recognized that ship strikes were a major problem off of California.
Ship strikes on whales,
On
to be
whales
clear, right?
specifically,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, I mean, ship strikes are a threat to other species too, but we at least visibly see the impacts on whales probably most. And we know that they are existing in places that overlap with a lot of shipping traffic. And so NOAA in 2007 in Southern California had an unusual mortality event on blue whales, where we actually had 4 blue whales wash up in Southern California with proven signs of ship strike collision. And it was diagnosed as a ship strike death. And so that really prompted the agency to start implementing measures, not regulatory measures, but basically take action to say, hey, shipping industry, there's a problem out here. We request that you reduce your speeds in these areas to try to reduce the likelihood that this happens. And that was, I think, a great concept, but like in a lot of places that implement voluntary measures, not necessarily something that folks listened to or cooperated with because it was voluntary. And so that's why the Blue Whales Blue Skies program was created years later in 2014, when a whole coalition of partners, which didn't just include the whale dork side, which is the side I live on, it also included the air district agencies that operate in California, because they were really interested in reducing vessel speeds to try to reduce air emission impacts associated with shipping. And so they all got together and they said, maybe we can try to incentivize vessels to slow down in these areas, because they weren't really listening to just a voluntary request from NOAA. And amazingly, it has worked. And it's transformed into a program that used to be incentive-based, meaning we would actually cobble together grant funding from different organizations to try to say, here's a really small financial incentive to billion-dollar shipping lines, which is funny now to reflect upon. But learned along the way that wasn't really the meaningful aspect of an incentive to them. To them, recognition is more powerful and more valuable. And so now we've become a program where we spend a lot of time verifying performance of the shipping lines in the program. We quantify what the environmental benefits of what they have done and what they've achieved. And then we spend a lot of time marketing and recognizing their behavior.
Amazing. I want to rewind all the way back to this problem. The original problem that Noah saw, which was that, okay, whales were getting struck by these large shipping vessels. And when I imagine, first of all, when I imagine a large shipping vessel, I'm picturing one of these massive boats with those containers, Maersk, or I can't remember all the different companies.
I appreciate you even calling out a single name, because I think that's part of the issue for, public awareness. We don't think about shipping because it's out of sight, out of mind. It's so few of us know who's moving the cargo that makes its way to our market shelves in our houses. So yes, you're imagining the right kind of thing.
Okay.
I try to help people understand how big the ships are by saying a lot of the container ships especially are the same size, if not longer, than the Empire State Building is tall.
Wow.
Like, these are wildly large ships
Holy smokes.
that are, 10 times, if not more, the size of the largest blue whales. So we think of blue whales being massive, which they are, and it's staggering how big they are, but nothing compared to the size of a container ship or another type of cargo ship too.
Okay, so these ships were striking whales, and that was the impetus, that there was this problem that we needed to protect the whales. And so NOAA initially sort of asked these companies to participate, and that wasn't super successful initially. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, it's been a problem that's documented way before 2008. There's an International Whaling Commission database that tracks ship strikes that go back, I think, to the 1980s, maybe even before that. I know within NOAA nationally, we track ship strikes. Every time there is an event, the strandings team will actually track what happened to the whale and what the presumed cause of death is, or confirmed, hopefully. And that goes back, again, I think, to the 70s or 80s. But it wasn't until 2007, 2008 in California where we saw really clear evidence that it was happening at a rate that might threaten, I guess, the sustainability of some of these populations, these threatened and endangered populations that we have in California. And so that's why NOAA started implementing measures. But then, as I said before, voluntary measures are pretty easy to ignore.
Yeah.
And so years and years went by where we were getting levels of cooperation that were like 10, 20%. And then it wasn't until an incentive program came in, the Blue Whales Blue Skies program, to get them to pay attention and see that they could actually add value to their brands if they chose to prioritize doing this.
I really want to dig into that sort of the brand value thing in a second because I find that really interesting. You also mentioned air quality. So who noticed that there was a problem and that shipping was maybe potentially a part of that problem?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a cool dimension of the work I get to do. And I'll say right off the bat, I think I already did, like, I'm the whale side of the house. I thankfully work with really brilliant air quality engineers who teach me the things that I should say that are correct. But digging deep is not my area, and I shouldn't attempt to do it too far. But I can say that, fuel burning vessels operating off of our coastline are contributing a whole bunch of emissions. After 10 years of working with these guys, I now know there's a slew of emissions that are the biggest problem ones. NOx is a huge one.
Nitrous oxide?
Nitrogen oxides.
Nitrogen oxide.
So they are basically the precursor to smog or ozone. So when you think about Southern California decades ago with all of the smog issues that they were facing, that's the main pollutant that led to that level of smog that Southern California faces. And it got a lot better. A lot of air regulations helped solve a lot of that, but it didn't solve it completely. And in some counties off of Southern California, like Ventura County and Santa Barbara County, the NOx emissions from shipping contribute somewhere close to or even above 50%.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So, I mean, a real big chunk of the pie.
A really big chunk of the pie. And they're operating in places where they don't have jurisdiction to necessarily do anything about it. And so this was a really beautiful opportunity for them to partner with the whale dorks and be like, hey guys, can we create this voluntary measure that allows us to try to impact these offshore emissions that come on shore and impact the coastal air quality in a way that we haven't been able to do thus far. But I should also mention it's not just NOx emissions that are a problem. Particulate matter is another pollutant that comes
very
from
small pieces of some sort of...
You don't want to breathe that in.
Yeah.
It's not good for you. That's pretty much the extent of what I understand.
Yeah.
But then there's also greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
There's plenty of greenhouse gas emissions associated with burning the type of fuel that these ships are burning. And so what we have found, not just us, but the world has found over decades of research, is that slowing down to more optimal speeds that are more efficient for these ship engines, kind of like when you drive your car at lower speeds, you will burn less fuel in your car at, 40 miles per gallon, miles per hour instead of 60. It's a similar translation for a lot of these large cargo ships. And so that's why this team got together and said, let's figure out a way to incentivize some of these cargo lines, these global shipping lines, to reduce their speeds in these places where we really need them to.
So by reducing speed, I think what I'm hearing is by reducing speed, I'm assuming it gives the whales a chance to get out of the way?
Yeah, that's a really big part of it. There's two dimensions of ship strike risk reducing when you slow a ship from, 16 knots down to 10. The biggest component, I would say, is that it gives the whale time to get out of the way. The other component is that there are cases where a ship can collide with a whale and it can actually survive that collision. And so those are the two factors we take into consideration when we're trying to think through how we can reduce risk. Typically, the models that we are using to inform this program factor in the evasion opportunity and then also the potential of survival if collisions occur. It matters. This is a debate that's 10 years, 15 years, 20 years long with the shipping industry. And I get different perspectives all the time on this. Adding time to a voyage plan for a cargo ship is a big deal. And I never want to minimize it. The thing that we usually try to focus on when we talk to these shipping lines about reducing their speeds from somewhere around 16, but honestly, lately, these days, because there are new incentives for them to go slower anyway, like, I mean, even this week with fuel prices going through the roof, they save money when they go slower. And so just on their own, even without us asking them, at certain times of the year and generally as a trend over the years, they are going slower. But my point with even if they're going 16 to 10 is that they are doing mainly international transits, a lot of these vessels. And the distance of the California coast to me is a big distance, but compared to the full transit distance they're taking, it's really not a huge percentage. They're doing trans-Pacific trips, they're going through the Panama Canal. And so for them to add a couple hours, which is what it usually equates to for our current zone configuration, is really not something that's a big deal if they can be told well enough in advance that they can build it into their operations. And that's been a really big part of lessons learned for us over the years. Is many, many years ago with this program, we were trying to keep things as dynamic as possible. We were like, let's not ask them to slow down unless we really know whales are there, and let's move around the zones when the whales move, and let's change the timelines as the whales adjust. And it's a great idea. I love the concept, but in reality, disseminating that information to a global international shipping fleet is hard, if not impossible. And so over the years, just talking to these shipping lines, they're like, can you just make this predictable and static so we know what we're doing? Because if you tell us early, we can build it in and we're going to do this thing.
So, all right. So the ships are slowing down. They're releasing fewer emissions. It either is giving whales time to get out of the way, or maybe less harmful if there is an impact. So these all seem on the surface seem like really good reasons. The shipping companies are even saving some money when they slow down. This all sounds like really good reasons for them to participate. But originally it wasn't working.
Yep.
And then you created an incentive structure. So tell us a little bit about what is that incentive for these companies and why does it work?
So we started out as an incentive program that tracked down grant funds wherever we could to figure out how we could actually put together financial awards to the shipping lines who chose to participate. So if you sign up for our program in the early years and you achieve a certain percentage of cooperation, you might be eligible for a $10,000 check, which to me, again, I'm like, that's amazing. But to them, they make like $5 billion in net profit for a lot of these companies. And so I don't think that was hugely persuasive. I think it got their attention, honestly. I think it was helpful for being like,
we're serious.
Come join us.
Yeah.
But then over the years, frankly, we started running out of grant funds. Was a huge part of it. And so one of the seasons where we were realizing we're getting down to the wire on some of our grant funds, we actually thought to ourselves, maybe we should ask them if any of them would decline or be willing to decline the funds so that we can put it back into the program for the next year's budget. Amazingly, 70% of the shipping lines that were eligible for financial awards in that first season said, nah, keep it. We don't need it. That's not why we're doing this. And so that's what made us realize we have to really double down on the marketing and public recognition aspect of this program, which is what it has completely evolved into now. Now there's no financial incentives. If you sign up as a global cargo carrier and enroll in this effort, you are eligible for public recognition if you achieve a high level of cooperation and participation in this program. And I think that's meaningful now. I think it was still meaningful in early years, but it becomes more and more meaningful to them as the scrutiny that they face as an industry and a sector increases. I said this earlier, but I mean, I think the shipping sector is so out of sight, out of mind for so many of us. Like me as a consumer, I have no idea or way to understand when I go to buy something, which shipping line carried it, what their practices looked like. But increasingly, that's becoming more important. And there's international groups like the International Maritime Organization that's starting to at least attempt to implement measures to actually make them more sustainable in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and other ways. And I think as that pressure has increased, they've started to see more and more opportunity to partner with us as a way to meet those standards, but also set themselves apart as leaders in this space. Because it's cool. They get to put a whale in their sustainability report in a way that maybe their competitors do not.
So the incentive is reputation, right? Brand building and reputation. Somehow today versus 20 years ago,
Yep.
that reputation carries more weight or more sort of impact for them.
Yep.
How are you actually recognizing them? What does that actually look like?
Well, every way we possibly can think of. And I think every year we ask them, is there something else we can do to do this right? But we do press releases, we do paid features, we do a ton of social media, and we is generous. There's really a team of people that do this beautifully that I shouldn't take credit for. We do a recognition event that I think is actually one of the things that the shipping lines appreciate most. Once a year, we gather, usually in Southern California, usually in the LA area, but this year we're going to be in Oakland if you would like to come.
Oh, fabulous.
Really
cool.
should come
Yeah,
if you
actually,
want.
that sounds like a blast.
It's fun. And we give out really cool awards. So we make whale tail trophies. And it sounds like, I remember years ago being like, are they going to care? Are they going to come? They love it. And I imagine part of it too is the photo opportunity. Like they get a great picture on a stage with a bunch of whale people getting an award that they can then splash along their whole website and sustainability reports. And that sets them apart again from their competitors in a way that clearly they have determined is valuable to them.
Do you find that these brands are competing with each other to get more recognition now? Like, is this like a
Totally.
yeah?
Yeah. So early days, we had 7 shipping lines enroll in 2014. And now more recent seasons, it's 45 to 50. And I think early days that was especially true, where some of the shipping lines being the folks, were like, I want to set myself apart from my competitors. And this is something that's unique that makes my customers aware that I'm doing something special. And I think that's still true. Like we have leaders in the program who I'm totally happy and should give shout outs to. Like Mediterranean Shipping Company is the largest global container line in the world. And they have been our longest standing leader in this program.
Shout out.
But then CMA CGM is this French-based container line that has just over the last 5 years like blown us away. They just got a 98% for 2025 season. 98% of all of their distance in our zones was traveled at 10 knots or less, which is honestly staggering for me. So the competitiveness is there, but I think what's interesting in recent years is that it's shifted, I think, more from, it used to be competitive and now it's more like enough of them are doing it that I think some of them now are like, I don't want to be left behind.
This is the baseline expectation.
Exactly. Like I think there's pressure to now be like, this is what everyone's doing, and if I don't get on it, people are going to notice.
Even multi-billion-dollar international corporations go through FOMO.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, we're all people. They're people too, right? And they want to be a part of it.
That's the shift that I think I have been witnessing in the last couple of years, which has been obviously really gratifying for me in the seat that I'm sitting in.
So let's talk about some results here. So tell us where we were at when the program started and where are we today?
Sure. So first year, 2014, 7 shipping lines enrolled. I think it was 27 transits in total. Slowed down. 2024 season, I should remember what 2025 is, but we're kind of finalizing it right now. So I'll go with 2024. It was somewhere around 750 of these individual transits and ships were slowing down off of the California coast. And it amounts to, at least for 2025 season, I can say this, it amounts to almost 500,000 nautical miles reduced speeds of 10 knots or less in these large areas off of California. So this is massive growth. Like every single year, I have had a lot of fun. I'm one of the people that actually analyzes the AIS data, which sometimes isn't fun, but
AIS data is...
Yes, good question. So AIS data is this tracking system data that all large ships are required to carry.
And this is publicly available information?
It's an interesting question. It technically is publicly available in the sense that if you, Jonathan, wanted to go on a cliff with an AIS receiver, you could pick up whatever you wanted. But not a lot of people have those receivers. And so if you want really high quality AIS information, you typically either have to go to a private vendor that provides that, or thankfully, because I affiliate with NOAA and we work with NOAA, we get that from the Coast Guard.
Okay.
But so it gives us really detailed information on what the ships are doing along all of their transits. Like every 2 to 3 seconds, they transmit their location and their speeds. And we can then look back at the end of the season and say, this is how MSC and CMA CGM did across the vessel speed reduction zones, which is really, really cool.
If you haven't visited the Seymour Marine Discovery Center at UC Santa Cruz in a while, or ever, you really should come visit us. We are right on the bluffs of the beautiful Monterey Bay, with an aquarium full of local species and a bunch of hands-on science exhibits that help you understand what's happening in our ocean and along our coast. We are connecting the incredible research happening at UC Santa Cruz with real-world solutions for our coastal community. We don't want science to just sit on a shelf. We want it to shape decisions, inspire kids, and help our community feel equipped to act. So if you care about the future of our ocean and our coastal community, or you just want to experience a place that makes you feel a little more connected to it, come visit us at the Seymour Marine Discovery Center. Science, Solutions, Santa Cruz. So you're collecting this data 24/7, 365.
Yep.
And then, but you're compiling and reporting once a year. It's not like you're sending real time messages to the ships slow down.
We are doing that too.
Okay, interesting.
So we're doing multiple versions of this. So we work with a group. If I talk about my affiliation with NOAA, we work with a marine exchange group that specializes in working with the maritime industry. And they have the ability to actually send real-time AIS messages. So the same system that tracks them can also get sort of like text messages on board. And we work with them basically. So if you are a large ship and you're in our vessel speed reduction zone and you're exceeding 10 knots, you'll get a nice, friendly little reminder you are in a vessel speed reduction zone. Please reduce your speeds. In addition to that, the Blue Whales Blue Skies program in recent years has partnered with this really cool group called Whale Safe that's part of the Benioff Ocean Science Laboratory. And they have allowed us to create basically monthly report cards. So instead of just getting our end of season reports, which I help generate with our NOAA data that says this is what your final grade looks like, they end up getting a monthly snapshot of how their company is performing and how each of their individual vessels are performing and where there might be problem areas in terms of where they're transiting, which I've found over the years is really helpful for them because these are people operating, again, transits that are international and huge in scale, and they sometimes don't know exactly where their ships are speeding up along the California coast. And this allows them to say, okay, I now know I need to call this ship and this captain and tell them this specific area is where they need to be more careful.
You brought up the captain. It's occurring to me as you're walking through this whole communication flow and the feedback systems and stuff. At the end of the day, there's a human being at the helm of this vessel who's having to make this decision on behalf of the whole corporation.
Yeah.
What is the captain's role, and what are the conversations that you're having with captains? What does it sound like from their point of view?
The times, honestly, that I've communicated with them most is when we've actually gotten reports of whales in the shipping lanes. Even when they're going slowly, we've gotten reports in the Santa Barbara Channel from some of the really great whale watch operators. There's a group of 30 humpbacks feeding right now in front of a container ship that's coming slowly, but still coming. And that's where it's been really amazing to be able to actually use VHF radio and call some of those captains of those vessels and say, there are whales right in front of you. Are you willing to reroute around the congregation of whales in front of you, concentration of whales? And every single time we have reached out to a captain to ask them to do that, they have said yes. And we have really cool examples just even showing in the data later. We show the whale data, there's this huge hot spot of whale activity and you'll see the ship track move around it. So they do have a role to play because they make those last minute decisions, but it really is the voyage planning team at these shipping lines that, in my opinion, do the magic behind the scenes to be we're going to do this thing and I'm going to make sure all the vessels know where and when to do it.
Has anything surprised you about working with the shipping industry that, coming from your science background and all the work that you've done, and all of a sudden you're working with these multi-billion-dollar corporations? What has surprised you about that?
I think a lot of things. I think one for me is that these are global international companies that we, or at least I, used to think about as being sort of faceless. And one is they're not. These are, the voyage planning folks are a good example. I've been amazed over 10 years that I've been able to develop the quality of relationships that I have with some of them. I can call them on their cell phones at a random notice and they will answer and they'll be excited to talk to me about what the latest is with whale conservation. they're legitimately enthusiastic about participating and doing whatever they can. And so that's just as like a human element of this, that's been a really pleasant surprise. And I think the other thing that's been shocking and for all of the team, not just me, is that the voluntary measures we've been implementing and this incentive program have achieved the level of cooperation and success that we have. So I mentioned we were prompted to create the incentive program because nobody was listening. And it was like 20% cooperation total for years and years and years. Since the Blue Whales Blue Skies program went into effect, we're closing in on around 70%. And that's for all large vessel traffic, like every
That's
ship
huge.
that's big.
That's huge.
And that if you were to just hone in on some of the cargo ship categories like container and car and tanker, you get closer to 85%. So for me, that's been one amazing, very pleasant surprise across my 10 years of working on this program. And I don't mean to say that we set out to do this and assumed we were going to fail, but I think we all thought maybe we'll get cooperation up to like 50%, but we're probably not going to exceed somewhere around then. It'll probably plateau. And that just hasn't been true. We've seen the number go up pretty much every year. And we've made it harder every year. Like, we're not also being very fair in some ways. Like, we are, because we're doing it for all the right reasons and we're trying to maximize whale conservation, air quality benefits. But they meet us where we ask them to meet us every year. And we keep expanding geographically. We keep extending our timeline of our season. And they keep meeting us at these higher cooperation totals. So that will consistently surprise me. And in a way that's now sort of the message I share with other folks around the world who are looking to create protection measures, is a lot of people, ourselves included, in the early days were like, regulations are the only way you're going to be able to achieve success. There are other options. I mean, I don't mean to say that regulations aren't necessary and great in terms of achieving conservation benefit. I think there's a place for them in all of this. But if you are somebody who's waiting for a regulatory approach for whale conservation, I don't think you need to wait. I think you can also implement a dynamic and flexible voluntary measure like we've done in California and see a lot of success with that approach if you do a really careful verification process like we do, and if you think carefully about how to recognize the shipping lines that are part of it.
What strikes me as unique about this is that there's a really clear win, win, win.
Yeah.
Pretty much everybody involved here has tangible and concrete outcomes that they can rely on for their own motivations, right?
Totally.
I mean, on the science and whale conservation side, obviously there's wins on that side of things. There's the air quality. But for these companies, which I think is probably the hardest nut to crack, is there's an economic reason to participate, and there's this human like recognition element, and that's part of the equation. So it's kind of like everybody wins when we all participate together.
That's what we say a lot. You're saying, like, we say win, 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 because I didn't mention the third co-benefit that we spend time quantifying, which is also really important. Ships are a lot quieter when they travel slowly, which benefits whales, but it also benefits marine ecosystems more broadly. And so that's something we've worked really closely with Scripps Institution of Oceanography to actually measure along the California coast. And actually locally here, we partner now with John Ryan at Mbari, and he has been amazing at showing us how much quieter Monterey Bay has gotten since we've implemented the vessel speed reduction zone. It's really cool and mind-blowing.
Wow.
We should have him as a guest to talk about that and a million other things. But
even though those vessels aren't entering Monterey Bay, the sound impact is still detectable.
Yep. So these are low frequencies. They travel. Unfortunately, they overlap a lot with the frequencies baleen whales are using to communicate. And so they're traveling far. They go, typically shipping noise is picked up on the hydrophones that Mbari operates and other ones in Monterey Bay. And he has shown me data that suggests that, at least for what he has a record on, the seasons where we implement VSR, especially 2024 season, was the quietest he's ever seen Monterey be on record, which is pretty crazy.
And what's the impact of that on Monterey Bay? You know, we actually had Carolyn Casey in.
Oh, cool.
On an episode recently, and so we were dissecting some of her work a bit.
Yeah.
She talked to us a little bit about how basically the sound environment impacts how marine animals can communicate and find their prey and find each other. Are there any other impacts of like a quieter Monterey Bay that we should celebrate?
I could really only speak to the whale side of the house on that one. That's where
Sure,
I would refer
please.
to my amazing Scripps Institution of Oceanography friends. So Dr. Vanessa Zobel is the lead researcher that we partner with on this stuff. She's a postdoctoral researcher now who got her PhD at Scripps. But she is now like a global lead on understanding how ship noise impacts ecosystems and especially whale populations and how to quiet them, how to quiet shipping based on different operational and also like retrofitting changes to the vessel designs. And basically, she's helped me understand because it's a tough topic. Like, sometimes they come up with numbers, and we talk about this a lot, where, for example, we cite that each transit in the program in 2024 on average was reduced by 5 decibels. The participating transit were 5 decibels quieter, which I'm like, that sounds amazing. What does that mean? Like, I have no idea as somebody who doesn't study this. And the way that she's helped me understand it is it's basically the equivalent of close to a 40% reduction in sound pressure on the marine environment. So it got 40% quieter in that ecosystem associated with that vessel passing by at slower speeds, which, you know, do what you can to help. But shipping noise is contributing so much to the ocean soundscape and that's one of the things that we can probably impact immediately and we actually have control over. And so that's one really huge benefit of the program that, again, is you were saying win-win-win. Like, we from the whale side, we're always focused on ship strike reduction. We brought in the air districts to focus on coastal air quality. And then along the way realized, hey, this underwater noise win is also really huge and needs to be celebrated.
So yeah, there's four winners out of this,
Yeah,
right?
the shipping
And the
industry
shipping
is the fourth.
themselves, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So look, like, congratulations and thank you for all this incredible work. I mean, it's an incredible success. And I have to ask, I mean, in a volunteer collaboration, there has to be risk, right? Like, what do you think is the risk or the threat to some voluntary collaboration like this falling apart or not working? Like, what are you aware of?
Honestly, the first thing that comes to mind is just the sustainability of the program itself. We are still grant-based, and that's been okay. We have been able to, with our partnerships with the air quality districts, get funding 3 to 5 years of funding at a time from CARB, the California Air Resources Board, because they also recognize the benefits of this program, which has been awesome. But that's not sustainable into the future. And so behind the scenes, we're sort of scrambling. We're not super stressed about it yet, but we're close to being super stressed about it. And I think the thing that we're looking ahead most to try to figure out is how can we create a stable funding mechanism with all that we're doing. And I think there's possibilities out there. Like, I can imagine sort of like a pay for verification program similar to many of the certification and verification programs that already exist, whether it's like fair trade or MSC seafood. Like, there's so many examples we can learn from and pull from. And at this point, there is no version of a sustainable whale safe shipping certification scheme that just doesn't exist right now, but there's appetite for it. So we're toying with that behind the scenes right now, because that's what threatens the sustainability of the program into the future. But one angle of it that I didn't mention that I should highlight that's extremely cool and I think gives me a lot of hope for that possibility is in probably the last 3 years, we started an ambassador program of Blue Whales, Blue Skies, where we don't just engage the shipping lines themselves that are part of this. We also engage the customers of those shipping lines, the cargo owners. And so basically the concept is if we can work with those customers and cargo owners, we can get them to recognize the shipping lines they're already working with for doing these things and prioritizing whale protection, but also maybe down the line, be more selective about which ones they choose to work with. And I think that's really powerful in itself. It has already, I think, grown in ways that have been exciting to watch. Like, we just got Patagonia this year, which is why I'm wearing Patagonia Blue Whales, Blue Skies branded stuff.
Shout out Patagonia.
Shout out Patagonia. But like Sonos, the speaker company, joined us not last year, but the year before. We've got Deckers, the shoe brand that makes like Tevas and Hokas and other shoes. So we're getting momentum on that, which is really cool. At this stage, because we are so regional in focus, I don't think we're at a point where those folks and ambassadors and corporate entities would pay for the data we're providing them, but they've all signaled they would if we can scale geographically and take this concept global. And so that's where I see the funding potential come for this program. So California is sustained, but also on a global basis, can we support whale protection efforts where they're needed?
That sounds to me like people should be donating to your program if they're listening to this.
If they can, we'd love it, but that's just a Band-Aid. We need to figure out the long-term strategy.
Yeah, this conversation reminds me of one of my favorite social impact articles came out of the Stanford Social Innovation Review, and it's about collective impact, this idea of collective impact. And apologies, I can't remember the authors' names at this moment, but it's an incredible article, and it's a whole framework for collective impact. And there's like 6 or 7 sort of tenets of a successful collective impact campaign, which I would sort of categorize Blue Whales, Blue Skies as collective impact. And one of the central tenets of that, what they put forward is an organizer, like an owner of the effort.
Yeah.
That's the role you play right now. And if that were to disappear, that would put the collective impact campaign at risk.
Totally.
Is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And we try to stress that to the shipping lines because they love that we're here.
Yeah.
This is truly a collaboration. We're not a pain to them. We're not somebody who's like a watchdog that's nagging them to do things they don't want to do that they're not benefiting from. So we've also explored with them, like, maybe there's a future where you pay for your own verification, but then, not to get in the weeds, but we worry about like conflict of interest. We don't want the folks funding the program to be the ones that we're certifying or verifying behavior on. So that's why it feels to me like it makes more sense down the line to get cargo owners on board so that one day, if you're Nike, which shout out to Nike, please join us. If you're Nike and you want to actually be able to say my supply chain is whale safe among all the other ways you care about sustainability, you can pay for access to data from Blue Whales, Blue Skies that allows you to do that, which I think would be hugely valuable. Like, most members of the public and consumers don't know that ordering all of their goods and buying the things that we buy has whale-related supply chain impacts. But I think all of us, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us would be willing to pay a little bit more and maybe wait a little bit longer if that meant we could guarantee that our goods are getting here in a way that allows whales to thrive.
Yeah, I certainly would. Well, so, you've done incredible work and have taken this program so far. The 20% to 70% uptake is just a kind of a mind-blowing improvement. But we're in 2026, and this campaign is not slowing down, pun intended.
I do that a lot. I'm always like, we need to pick up speed, and then I'm like, no.
Where do we go next, Jess? What happens next?
We are weeks, maybe days away from launching the 2026 measures in California, and it's really just a new landscape for us right now because I explained the history of the program has been one where NOAA as an agency has set the rules on what the measures are, and the Blue Whales, Blue Skies program as a coalition of partners, which includes air districts, California Marine Sanctuary Foundation, and NOAA, has really come together to support that and motivate cooperation. We just had big changes in 2025 where state legislation was passed, a bill that was introduced by Greg Hart, Assemblymember Greg Hart, basically authorized the Blue Whales, Blue Skies program to go statewide and authorized the Blue Whales, Blue Skies program to be the leader in implementing it in a way that, again, because it was a NOAA federal-led effort in the past, this is a little different.
It's transferred ownership from a federal body to a nonprofit.
Correct.
Yeah.
And brought in the state of California because we don't just get the legislation from the state of California helping to drive this forward now. We also have Ocean Protection Council, which is part of the California Natural Resources Agency. They are now advisors on us implementing the version of this program in 2026. So behind the scenes for several months now, we've been trying to figure out what that means for implementation. Stay tuned, basically like a week or two, and we should actually be announcing what that's going to look like. But everything's on the table at this point, and the legislation as it's written was meant to have this be a border-to-border, Oregon to Mexico statewide program, which would drastically increase the size of where we're asking vessels to slow down off of the California coast.
Because right now it's limited to the Santa Barbara, port area and the San Francisco port area. Is that right?
So it's evolved so much. The 2025 zones are actually pretty large. They're hundreds of nautical miles long, wide, however you look at it. Southern California extend basically from Orange County up to Point Conception. And then there was a gap. Oh, sorry, that changed last year. That now we include Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary because that was a newly designated sanctuary space. So I should correct to say Orange County all the way up to Morro Bay is where we had been implementing it in 2025. And then for Northern California, it was basically just north of there where the Monterey Bay Sanctuary southern extent exists, all the way up to Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary's northern extent. So like north of Point Arena is the rough extent for folks who are familiar with those sort of landmarks. So big areas, but not compared to the entire coastline of California. Like this is massive in terms of adding space. And it's important. And that's why we're deliberating it so much behind the scenes, because we want to, be fair to our industry partners. Like sincerely, this has been a collaboration with the shipping lines in a way that we don't want to leave anybody behind. We don't want to make this too difficult. But the reality is the whale habitat exists well outside of the zones that we implemented in 2025. It exists farther offshore in some cases, but it also exists north and south of where we have those areas. And in addition, the air quality impacts problem is real in other areas off of the coast. We have prevailing winds in California that bring the emissions from these vessels even up to 100 nautical miles from shore to these coastal communities. And so it's this combination of reasons that the legislators in California came to this conclusion that this is something worth pursuing, especially because it's voluntary. And hopefully the shipping lines can rise to the occasion and get recognition for doing this.
So we're recording this in early March. By the time this episode comes out, I think maybe some of the news or some of the updates will be
It's
will
very
be
likely.
available,
If you go to bluewhalesblueskies.org, you will probably see the latest by the time this was released.
And when we release it, we'll make sure to link to all that.
Perfect.
So listeners can go check it out. Jess, anything else that you want to address or plug before we wrap up for the day?
I think the only other thing, I sort of touched on it when I talked about going global, but I think that's the thing I want to emphasize is that ship strikes are not something that's unique to the California coast. They're not unique to the United States. They're a problem around the world. There are so many places that are either already implementing measures, maybe they're voluntary and they're not getting very high levels of cooperation. There's even more places where they really need measures and they're just not doing it yet. And I think a lot of that stems from people waiting for permission or processes associated with getting regulations. And so, as I noted before, one of the coolest parts about this program, because it's voluntary, is that it can be implemented quickly, dynamically. In some instances, you could pull this together in a number of months if you get approval from managers to do something like this. And so I think there's a ton of potential and scalability to doing something like this. And I think that, again, lends itself to a version of a certification scheme that is not region specific. So I personally, I'm invested for a million reasons. I want to see more whale protection measures in places where they're needed, but I also really want to see compliance grades for all of these efforts around the world combined in a way that if you are MSC or CMA CGM and you're a leader on this issue, they get credit for it. Because right now they're doing things in other parts of the world that nobody really understands because we're not connecting the dots globally. And I think that's going to be incredibly powerful when we're able to unlock that. Just haven't done it yet.
Honestly, it sounds like you're kind of right at the beginning. Like there's a lot of work ahead of us, but it's built on a foundation of incredible success. So thank you for everything that you do. I feel so proud that you are in this community and that you are doing the good work at the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation. So we will be following closely along the way. And if there's anything we can do to help, please.
Well, I didn't even mention it, but I should have, that your amazing Seymour Center also was so awesome in sending postcards to some of our ambassadors. I mentioned the ambassador program where we engage the cargo owners and retailers, but the Seymour Center was one of the places that signed up and said, yes, we'll help you in sending letters to either ones that hadn't signed on yet or ones that had. The ones that hadn't said, please think about this, pay attention to this program. And then the ones who had been like, Thank you so much. This is such a cool thing. So
Yeah.
thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We
And
need more of that.
we sent thousands of letters, and that came from people in our community who came in, learned about the issue, and decided to take action on the spot. So
That's so awesome.
it's a shout out to this community and everybody who cares about this stuff. So
That's what I say to people when they're like, what can I do?
Yeah.
I'm like, talk to the corporate entities, because it's hard to talk to shipping lines, but if you can talk to your brands and say, I want you to pay attention to this, it's a game changer.
yeah, money talks.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'll buy your shoes if they're whale safe. Right.
Exactly.
It really.
That's where I hope to go.
It really is a lever.
Yeah.
Okay, that's Jess Morten, Director of Marine Resource Protection at the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation. Thanks so much, Jess.
Thank you.
All right, that does it for the pod. Thanks, Jess Morten from the Blue Whales, Blue Skies, and the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation. In fact, thanks to everybody at the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation and all of you working on the Blue Whales, Blue Skies program, including all of the corporations who are choosing to participate in the Vehicle Speed Reduction Program, and all the corporations who are also shipping their products on those vessels, who are ambassadors for the Blue Whales, Blue Skies program. So thanks. This is an incredible collaboration. Thanks to everybody involved. Thanks to Edith for editing. Thanks to Carrie for production. Thanks to Annie for distribution. We'll see you next time.